Amazing discoveries have occurred throughout history, shaking the very foundations of our ideas and redefining what it is to be human. These discoveries have played a unique role throughout history, from the earliest eras to the present. And many years later, archaeologists continue to gather information that leads to the uncovering of significant but also terrifying discoveries that boggle the great minds of scientists. Join us as we explore these terrifying archaeological discoveries that shocked scientists. World's unluckiest man. In AD 79, when Mount Vesuvius erupted close to Pompeii, hundreds or thousands of massive rocks were launched into the air by the explosion. Several of them tore through homes and buildings hundreds of kilometers away. But at least one landed on top of a scared guy who may have been fleeing for his life. At least that is how archaeologists initially perceive the situation to have developed. Junior archaeologists, neighborhood volunteers, and even a few reputable archaeologists came to the conclusion that the case was closed after the guy was discovered face down close to Pompeii Archaeological Park, with a large boulder covering the upper section of his body. Because so few people are killed by flying rocks, he's often referred to as the world's unluckiest man. But some scientists now admit that they may have gotten it all wrong, mainly because when the rock was removed, they found that the man's skull, limbs, spine and torso were intact and not crushed. First off, the man had a leg infection prior to his tragic demise that was so far along that it might have finally been lethal if he hadn't perished in the eruption. He would have been unluckily slowed down by this infection. Meanwhile, others would have gotten a safe place to hide, especially indoors, away from the eruption and its aftermath. His death was, therefore, almost certainly caused by something else, probably asphyxia resulting from pyroclastic flow, which is how the vast majority of victims perish during volcanic events. During volcanic eruptions, thick, turbulent volumes of ash, highly heated gases, and broken up lava are hurled into the air. The pyroclastic flow volume from Vesuvius was most likely measured in the tens or hundreds of thousands of tons. It was incredibly hot and moving at breakneck speed, and it killed and destroyed much of what was in its path, including the poor Pompeian man with an infected leg. Or either he was already dead or rendered immobile, and the advancing lava then carried the rock until it eventually came to rest on top of him when the flow subsided. Although the man was extremely unlucky, he was probably no more unlucky than the other 16,000 people who died in the tragic incident. Most bizarre cups ever. 3 skulls were discovered in Somerset, England's Goff's Cave. This is a typical discovery for archaeologists, particularly in older caves that haven't been explored in a while, but the purpose for which these skulls were employed was what made them so peculiar. It was discovered after extensive analysis that these skulls had been utilized as cups. Yes, you heard right, human skulls were used as drinking cups. They were discovered to be 14,700 years old, making them the oldest skulls ever known to have been used for drinking. And that wasn't the end of it. There were more bone remnants dispersed around the skull cups, and these remnants were discovered to have had their marrow sucked out of them, indicated by cracks in the bones, which led archaeologists to think that cannibalism was rampant back in the time. Even though it's difficult to conceive something so upsetting happening, it appears that's likely what happened all those years ago. Of course, since it occurred so long ago, it is difficult to determine if this was carried out in response to food scarcity or whether it was a common occurrence. Either way, don't you think it's spine-chilling just imagining it happening? Terrifying tools and piles of skulls. After a number of tools from a pre-Aztec culture were discovered, there are a lot of questions about the materials they could have been built of. And after some investigation, the truth was out in the open. Skeletal remains such as skulls and femurs were discovered to have been utilized and transformed into objects that the inhabitants of the time may have used on a daily basis. A total of over 5,000 pieces of bone were examined, and it was discovered that they're all natives of Teotihuacan, an ancient metropolis. They promptly got to work using stones to remove things like muscle and skin when those they loved passed away. This was done so they could get to the bones while they were still robust. If too much time passed, the bones would become fragile and unusable as instruments. It's undoubtedly not something that many people would do with their loved ones today, but it was once a custom. Also, archaeologists at Teotihuacan discovered a variety of unsettling artifacts in addition to human tools. They found something extremely intriguing at the bottom of what was once a sizable lake. 150 skulls were discovered in heaps lining the bottom of the former aquatic region. They exist as proof of mass human sacrifice. It has been discovered that this unsettling discovery is at least 1,100 years old. Since the researchers chose not to publish the images of the skulls out of respect for the indigenous civilizations they believe to be connected to these discoveries, you probably won't see or even hear much about the discovery. Although it is wrong to denigrate any kind of culture, seeing the pictures will help us understand pre-Aztec civilization better. Old knife arm. Archaeologists found the remains of a man who had a distinctive prosthetic appendage while working on the Longboard necropolis in northern Italy in the middle of the 1980s. He died between 1,200 and 1,400 years ago. Hundreds of skeletons were unearthed in the necropolis, and like the famous scene from The Godfather, a horse without its head. But despite these unique finds, something stood out: the one-armed man. According to scientists, his arm had been severed around the mid-forearm years earlier, most likely due to trauma from a fall-related compound fracture or being crushed by a huge stone. Medical amputations were still rather regular even back then, but the majority of those who lost limbs didn't survive for very long. But why choose a knife hand? Imagine you had a deadly sword in place of a hand. It would not only be dangerous to you as it could potentially lead to self-harm, but also terrifying to others. Whatever the case, he made a remarkable recovery and lived a reasonably long life well before the invention of antibiotics. Although his burial style reveals he was of low status, his survival shows that there is a high value placed on human life, even for the unfortunate and injured. The very first leper. Archaeologists discovered something utterly astonishing in 2009 while exploring India. Although archaeologists sometimes uncover numerous remnants of a past life when working in archaeological digs, they rarely come across something as uncommon as an illness like this. They came upon what is currently the earliest proof of leprosy in a 4,000-year-old skeleton. It's the earliest leprosy case discovered in India and the oldest skeleton ever discovered with leprosy traces. This also supports the idea that new commercial routes allowed leprosy to spread from Asia to Africa. It is truly quite challenging to identify and analyze leprosy. Scientists have been attempting to find the disease's cause for years without success. Leprosy is difficult to culture, which makes it challenging to study in corpses that have deteriorated or even in bodies that appear to have potential for research. Creepy Peruvian skeletons in a circle. A Peruvian tomb with skeletons arranged in very odd ways was found at the historic site of Pachacamac. These skeletons, which were arranged in a circle around a tomb, were made up of the bones of extremely young people and were in the fetal position. It's safe to say this can be marked as one of the creepiest discoveries ever made, simply because of the way the bones were arranged. In the middle of it all was a tomb, and some people believe that it was a resting place for pilgrims who had come to Pachacamac for miracle cures and didn't get what they had anticipated. Some of the victims are thought to have passed away naturally. However, it's unclear to archaeologists whether the victims died spontaneously or as a result of sacrifice. There was a total of 80 bodies discovered at the scene. It's regarded as the largest discovery of human remains at Pachacamac, and archaeologists and scholars are still very puzzled by it. The Venice vampire skull. Few people really knew how to deal with the large number of bodies that were starting to accumulate when the plague struck Venice in 1576. Of course, they buried them all together because that was the only thing that could be done at the time. At the burial site, archaeologists found a strange skull with a brick jammed in its mouth so far back that the jaw was fractured after uncovering numerous other bones. And after investigating the skull's past, experts discovered that it belonged to an elderly woman who had resided in the area at the time and had outlived most others by a significant margin. Her age was guessed to be between 60 and 71. In those days, people didn't typically live that long. Her gravediggers decided to put a brick in her mouth after she passed away because they believed her to be a vampire, and they felt that by doing that, they were stopping her from resurrecting. The woman most likely simply had a healthier lifestyle than most, but at the time, people weren't taking any chances. Possible alien skulls. According to the images of these alleged alien skulls, you will see that they look incredibly distinct in a strange way. Because these skulls are longer and built differently than typical skulls, conspiracy theorists have concluded that they are owned by aliens, but this isn't the case at all. In some social formations, elongated heads were actually rather common. They have been discovered in Mexico and Peru. It is still practiced today in a few parts of the world. Artificial cranial deformation, a procedure intended to alter a child's skull's natural growth, can be carried out by using fabric or wood. However, because of this practice, several really intriguing and terrifying-looking skulls were left behind, leading some to wonder whether they truly might have had extraterrestrial origins. Preserved bog victims. The Nebelgard Moser is a location in northwestern Europe. It is a swamp where more corpses have been exhumed from its depths than anyone could have imagined. When these bodies were discovered, they were so well preserved, and because of that, researchers were able to learn a lot about the individuals from their findings. These remains, which are more often known as bog bodies, range from somewhere between 8000 BCE and the medieval era. Examination revealed that neither the remains had been buried in the bogs, nor had they just happened to be there when they passed away. According to experts, they were probably sacrificed, punished for disobeying the law, or given faults because they were seen to be unnatural at the time. Voynich manuscript. The Voynich manuscript is known as the world's most mysterious manuscript of all time. It's possible that the Voynich manuscript language was never intended to be read. Its significance has baffled professionals and machines alike since Wilfrid Voynich made it famous in 1912. So how much closer are we to cracking the Voynich code, or will it always be a mystery? The 15th century Voynich manuscript, which is barely bigger than a compact book, is a linguistic puzzle, an ineligible code with a hazy past. Even the top scholars, codebreakers, and scientists have failed to decipher the messages contained within this lavishly designed book. The Voynich manuscript, which measures 22.5 by 16 centimeters, has 200 pages of handwritten text and images. Its vellum folios feature naked bathing women, astrological charts, and exotic vegetation. Additionally, there is writing in a confusing language all around it. The cryptic text found inside the Voynich manuscript is by far its most remarkable feature. Although it did occasionally use a Latin character, the most of it was written in a language that is unheard of, perhaps lost to time. Furthermore, it has perplexed renowned academics, researchers, and codebreakers ever since. The Voynich manuscript language has become known as Voynichese or the Voynich code. Regardless of whether it is a language, a code, or something new, what does the Voynich manuscript aim to achieve? There isn't a particularly compelling argument explaining the Voynich manuscript's goal or why it would have been written in a secret language. The Voynich code is not nearly as mysterious as the drawings. These vibrant pictures can be seen all over the pages and give the impression that it may have been a pharmacopoeia or other kind of medical manual. But even the fact that it incorporates plants and what appear to be medical components, most of it doesn't seem to be grounded in reality. Since its discovery, articles with titles like Voynich Decoded have appeared in 2020, 2021, and pretty much every year since. In fact, a wide range of experts, specialists, and professionals have tried to decode the Voynich manuscript language. Elizabeth and William Friedman, American cryptographers from World War II, were among them. Supercomputers have been used to perform this more recently. It has been claimed to be everything from a book of witchcraft to a women's health manual that was plagiarized. However, no claim has yet been proven true, and all previous attempts have proved fruitless. The Voynich manuscript's significance is still a mystery. It seems unfathomable that there could be an unbreakable code when we have access to such advanced technology like computers and machinery. Perhaps more than anything else, this has persuaded many people that the Voynich manuscript is a fake. However, there is still a lot of interest in the codex and the Voynich manuscript language, and many people are still working on the issue. If it will ever be resolved, only time will tell. The London Hammer, a tool older than history. Max Hahn and his wife Emma went out for a stroll in June 1936 or 1934 according to other versions, when they came across a rock that had wood sticking out of its center. They made the choice to bring the anomaly home and subsequently used a hammer and chisel to open it. Ironically, what they discovered inside resembled an archaic hammer. Thereafter, they turned it over to a group of archaeologists that examined it, and as it turned out, the rock housing the hammer was dated to the Ordovician, which is more than 400 million years old. There are some doubts about that dating, but here's the really amazing part. Early measurements revealed that the hammer itself was over 500 million years old. It appears to be so old that a portion of the handle has started to turn into coal. Of course, creationists jumped all over this, and in the 1980s, creationist Carl Bohr seized the opportunity to speculate about how the atmosphere of a pre-flood Earth would have supported the growth of giants. The hammer's head is purer than anything nature could have produced on its own without the aid of technology, consisting of more than 96% iron. The initial dating, however, is seriously in doubt, and just because the hammer was found encased in ancient rocks doesn't guarantee that it is also that old. The only theory put out, which has not yet been proven, is that the highly soluble material in the old limestone may have congealed around the object, giving the impression that it is as old as the materials themselves. In fact, radiocarbon analysis of the hammer itself has not yet been done, which raises serious doubts about the hammer's age. It's sad that the hammer is now on display in the so-called Creation Evidence Museum because the curators forbid scientific testing on the London hammer. The Antikythera mechanism, a Greek ancient computer. The earliest mechanical computer has been dubbed the Antikythera mechanism. It was created to compute astronomical positions and was discovered in a shipwreck 45 meters under the surface off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera. It is roughly as complicated as an excellent clock from the 18th century, consisting of a box with dials on the outside and an extremely intricate assembly of gear wheels installed inside. Scientists have been forced to acknowledge that their preconceived notions about ancient Greek engineering may be incorrect due to the device's level of sophistication. Nothing like this exists, and none of the known texts from the time it was created make any reference to it. The knowledge we do possess suggests that this mechanism shouldn't even exist. Professor Michael Edmonds of Cardiff University, who oversaw the group that investigated the mechanism, stated the following: "This device is just extraordinary, the only thing of its kind. The design is beautiful, the astronomy is exactly right. The way the mechanics are designed just make your jaw drop. Whoever has done this has done it extremely carefully," he added. "In terms of historic and scarcity value, I have to regard this mechanism as being more valuable than the Mona Lisa." It seems reasonable to presume that the Antikythera has numerous precursors given its incredible complexity, but none have been discovered, making it even more impressive. Based on the device's fascinating complexity, we can assume that the Antikythera has other predecessors, even though none is yet to be found. The complexity and workmanship did not appear again in Europe until the development of astronomical mechanical clocks in the 14th century. So how did the ancient Greeks, who had virtually no access to technology, manage to create such a sophisticated calculator? Well, as of now, there's no logical answer to that. The 26,000-year-old Amazon warrior girl. The mummified remains, which were initially thought to be male and discovered about 34 years ago, were recently identified as female. In 1988, a group of experts thought they had found a young boy or man when they found the mummified body of a young warrior in the Tuva Republic of modern-day Russia. But about 34 years later, new technology allowed for the disproof of that assumption. The warrior who passed away was a young woman, and it's possible that she was one of the famous Amazon warriors from ancient Greek literature. The remains were thought to have been buried in the early 6th century BC when they were first discovered by scientists Marina Kalunovskaya and Vladimir Semyonov. A number of artifacts, including tools used by exceptionally renowned warriors, were found at the site during the excavation of the 2,600-year-old remains. A wart on the young girl's face was still clearly apparent because of how well preserved her body was. The location was strewn with amazing discoveries, including a 3-foot birch bow, an axe, and a group of 10 arrows. The arrows were made of a variety of metals. Some had wood tips, while others had bone or bronze components. The warrior's remains were discovered dressed in a brown pair of pants and a shirt underneath a double-breasted fur coat. However, objects that are often associated with women, such as beads and mirrors, were not present. Therefore, it was initially assumed that this was a man's grave. The researchers were able to disprove this theory only through DNA testing. The Laboratory of Historical Genetics, Radiocarbon Investigation, and Applied Physics in Moscow recently conducted an analysis that revealed that this warrior was not only a girl but also a very young girl. The findings indicated that the deceased girl was between the ages of 12 and 13 at the time of her passing. This revelation, which offers new light on the social history of Scythian society, astounded Kilonovskaya. Naturally, it also draws her attention to the legend surrounding the Amazons. The Amazon warriors are said to have been first mentioned in ancient Greek literature in Homer's Iliad, which dates from the 8th century BC. He referred to them as anti-Nerai, which scholars have interpreted to mean either the equal of men or the antithesis of men. A few centuries later, Herodotus wrote about the Amazons and stated that these ladies were from Scythia in central Eurasia. In the end, that pessimistic mindset is being debunked every year as new archaeological finds turn up female warrior graves all over the globe. The Saqqara bird, an Egyptian plane. The Saqqara bird, which was found during the 1898 excavation of the Padi Iman tomb in Saqqara, Egypt, is a bird-shaped artifact carved from sycamore tree wood. It has a wingspan of more than 7 inches, weighs just under 40 grams, and is thought to have existed between 200 BC and 2200 years ago. Its purpose has been the subject of some conjecture due to a lack of documentation and other information. It's true that the ancient Egyptians were highly versed in aviation principles, but it's unclear how this applied to the artifact in question. So what was the goal of it? Was it just a wealthy Egyptian child's toy? Did it have any ceremonial significance? The item does, however, lack many genuine avian characteristics. It resembles no known bird because of its vertical tail, which resembles that of an airplane or glider. Khalil Messiah, an Egyptian doctor, archaeologist, parapsychologist, and dowser, has hypothesized that the first aircraft was created by the ancient Egyptians. Scientists have later concluded that it could not have been a functional aircraft due to a lack of technology, but it may have actually been a glider.